The storm rattled the cabin windows, but this sound cut through the noise. Not branches, not wind. Something alive. Her flashlight beam revealed a black bear cub, barely 4 months old, fur-matted with mud and blood. His ribs showed through thinning fur, paws raw from miles of travel. But those eyes, human in their desperation. He didn't growl, didn't whimper, just stepped backward into the storm, gaze locked on hers. The message was clear. Follow me, now, before it's too late. Coda, she named him in that heartbeat between fear and decision, smelled of wet earth and something darker, iron, death. His claws were worn to the quick, his breathing ragged. This wasn't a lost cub. This was a survivor. He turned toward the pines, then looked back. Not an invitation, a demand. Behind him, the forest swallowed the path whole. The wind shifted, carrying that metallic tang again. Blood, old blood, whatever horror Coda had escaped. He was leading her straight to its heart. Protocol screamed in her head. Never approach, never interfere. But as Coda collapsed on her porch steps, his heartbeat fluttering like a dying bird's, Marlowe moved. Rope, med kit, sat phone. The cub watched her pack, his dark eyes tracking every movement. When she lifted him, his warmth seeped through her jacket. The trees whispered warnings as she stepped into their domain. Science had rules, ethics had protocols. But love recognized no boundaries. And tonight, love was the only compass that mattered. The cheerful ponderosis near camp gave way to ancient firs, their trunks wide enough to hide secrets. No birds called here, no squirrels chattered, just the drip, drip, drip of rainwater, and Coda's labored panting. The cub led her toward the gorge, where the river's roar vibrated in her teeth. Then, the wind shifted. The smell hit her like a punch. Rotting leaves, wet stone, and beneath it, copper, blood, old blood. Coda pressed on, his body failing, his purpose unshaken, dragging them both toward whatever nightmare waited. His wobbling gait told the story. 72 hours without milk, without shelter. Yet Coda marched on, pausing only to nudge Marlowe's boot. Hurry. She dribbled water into his mouth, his rough tongue scraping her palm. He drank, then immediately turned back to the path. Loyalty? Instinct? No. This was purpose, the kind that outlasts strength. The cliffs loomed above, boulders balanced on threads of erosion. One wrong step, one loud noise, but the cub didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Not when his siblings' lives hung in the balance. A sound like the earth splitting open. Marlowe barely yanked Coda against her chest before the world erupted. Rock shearing from cliffs, trees snapping like twigs, dust choking the air. When it cleared, the gorge was changed. A fresh wound of rubble. And there, half buried under a shattered oak, a swath of black fur. Too still, too big. Coda's mother, dead. But the cub didn't mourn. He scrambled toward the wreckage, whining, because the landslide hadn't just taken one life, it had trapped others. Marlowe crawled under the roots, flashlight beam shaking. The den, what remained, was a tomb of mud and splinters, and there, wedged behind granite, two tiny shapes, Clover and Zane, barely alive, fur-crusted with dirt. But it was the mother's body that shattered her. One massive paw, still stretched toward her cubs, claws dug deep into the earth, like she'd tried to hold the collapsing world at bay. Marlowe's tears hit the dirt. This wasn't nature, this was sacrifice, and it demanded witness. Her fingers brushed Clover's ribs, so fragile, like a bird's hollow bones. The cub didn't stir. Zane, slightly larger, lifted his head with a whimper that never made sound. Dehydration, hypothermia, starvation. The clinical terms meant nothing here. Coda wriggled from her arms, licking his siblings' faces, as if love alone could fix this. Outside, thunder growled. Rain began to patter on the debris. Time was a noose tightening. She reached for her radio. Someone had to hear her. Someone had to care. Water sluiced down the gorge walls, turning dirt to slurry. The den's ceiling groaned. Marlowe shielded the cubs, mud oozing between roots. Her radio spat static. No signal. Coda pressed against her, trembling. Not from cold, from knowing. This storm wanted them buried. Somewhere above, a tree crashed down. Clover whimpered. Marlowe did the only thing left. She jammed the whistle between her lips and blew. 3 sharp shrieks. Prayer in the dark. A promise. We're still here. A crackle. Then a voice rough as gravel. You're asking me to die for bears? Slate Wilder, the recluse rescue tracker, famous for finding lost hikers and hating fools. Her plea tangled with the storm's howl. They're just cubs. Silence. Then, the click of a mic winch. Ropes. And pray your Jeep don't drown. The line died. Outside, the landslide shifted. But now they had a chance. Static hissed between them, like the mountain itself objecting. Marlowe pressed the radio to her lips, her words sharp with desperation. They're just babies. Silence. Then, that gravelly voice again. Colder now. Lost a man last year. Same damn gorge. The unspoken truth hung between them. Some lives were deemed worth more than others. Outside, the landslide groaned. Coda nosed her hand. His touch sang what Slate wouldn't. Try again. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. The storm marked time like an executioner. Clover's breaths came further apart now, her tiny chest barely moving. Zane had stopped whimpering altogether. Marlowe's fingers trembled as she checked pulses, each fainter than the last. Coda watched her, his eyes pools of understanding. No, not understanding. Acceptance. The kind that comes when hope's candle gutters. She tore open the trauma kit. Think, damn it, there had to be a way. A ricochet whine. Then searing pain as shale sliced her shoulder. The gorge had become a battlefield, and nature was deploying its artillery. Hailstones the size of quarters pelted them, each impact a fresh bruise. Coda yelped as one struck his flank, but kept licking Zane's face. Marlowe shielded them with her body, tasting blood where she'd bitten her cheek. This wasn't weather anymore. This was the land itself saying, you don't belong here. Too bad. She'd made a promise. No engine roar, no shouted greetings, just sudden movement at the edge of her vision. The man moved like part of the storm itself, his oilskin coat black with rain. But when he dropped beside her in the mud, Marlowe saw it, the flicker in those steel-gray eyes. Not reluctance, fear, the kind carved by old grief. He sized up the crumbling den. Then her. Then the cubs. His jaw worked, like he was chewing on something bitter. Finally, one word. Winch. Marlowe's hope curdled as Slate shrugged off his pack, revealing no heavy equipment, just a collapsible shovel, some rope, and a come-along hand winch better suited for fencing than rescue. You call this? Call it what's left. After the divorce, he snapped. The raw honesty stunned her. This wasn't just gear. It was all he had left. Coda whined, drawing their attention back to the trapped cubs. Slate spat tobacco, then got to work. Pray that slab's not wedged. The flashlight beam trembled as Slate crawled inside, revealing the awful truth. What remained of the den was collapsing inward, dirt sifting between roots like an hourglass. Clover and Zane lay motionless now, their fur gray with dust. Only the faintest rise of their ribs proved they still fought. Slate braced the ceiling with his shoulders, veins standing out in his neck. Gonna need both hands. Document. His voice strained, but his meaning was clear. She'd have to go in deeper, into that suffocating dark. The sound barely registered, more vibration than noise, like the last sigh of a dying light bulb. Marlowe wriggled forward, her cheek pressed into the mud. Clover's eyes were half-lidded, her tongue dry as parchment. When Marlowe touched her, the cub didn't react. Only the faintest warmth proved life still clung to that tiny body. Behind her, Slate groaned under the weight of shifting debris. Hurry, or we all stay. Coda's cold nose brushed her ankle, urging her onward. The larger cub had positioned himself over Clover, his body a living barricade. Even near death, instinct demanded protection. Marlowe's throat tightened. She'd seen this pose before, in photos from war zones, in hospital wards after disasters. The universal language of love stronger than survival. Slate's flashlight caught the glitter of Zane's eyes, watching her, not pleading, just waiting, like he'd already made peace with whatever came next. Blood slicked the granite, making each grip more precarious. The slab trapping the cubs hadn't shifted an inch. Marlowe's nails tore, her knuckles scraped raw. Somewhere above, Slate cursed as the winch cable snapped taut. Once more, he roared. The cable whined. The rock groaned, and pain shot up her arms like lightning. Coda suddenly lunged forward, wedging his small body beneath the slab. His yelp of pain was the most terrible sound she'd ever heard, and the bravest. It started as droplets, then became a deluge. The den's walls sagged inward, liquid earth oozing between roots. Marlowe's boots lost purchase, sending her sliding into Slate. The big man didn't flinch, just anchored them both with sheer mass. Last try, he gasped. The winch handle turned, metal screaming. Coda whimpered but held his position. Then, an awful crack, not the rock breaking, but the ground beneath them. The world tilted, and darkness rushed up to meet them. Marlowe's final desperate shriek hung in the air as the ceiling collapsed. Dirt filled her mouth, her nose, her lungs. The crushing weight pressed her into the mud, Coda's small body trembling against her chest. Somewhere beyond the roaring in her ears, she heard Clover's faint whimper. Then, nothing. No light, no sound. Just the awful knowledge. This is how it ends. Buried alive, with 3 innocent souls depending on her. The darkness swallowed her scream. Consciousness returned in fragments, the coppery taste in her mouth, the unbearable pressure on her ribs. Coda's heartbeat, faint but steady against her palm. The wetness on her skin, was it blood from her torn scalp, or tears she hadn't realized she'd shed? Clover stirred weakly beneath her, her tiny breaths coming faster now. Panicked, Marlowe's fingers found Zane's fur, still warm, alive. All 3, for now, somewhere above, through tons of earth. She imagined she heard digging. Or was that just hope playing tricks? The words formed in her mind, if not her ruined voice. Please, not them. Take me instead. The dirt tasted like communion wafers, bitter and holy. Coda's weight slumped against her, his strength finally spent. Somewhere beyond the grave they shared, a shovel struck stone. Again, fainter each time. Or was it her hearing failing? Marlowe pressed her forehead to Clover's, pouring every remaining ounce of will into that tiny body. Live, please live. The darkness whispered back. Why? The air grew thicker, heavier. Each breath burned. Clover's ribs moved like a failing bellows, each expansion weaker than the last. Zane had gone terrifyingly still, his nose pressed to his sister's flank. Coda licked Marlowe's face frantically, his rough tongue the only tether to reality. Her vision tunneled, thoughts turning syrupy. Funny, she'd always wondered how she'd die, never imagined it would be like this, holding 3 small hearts, waiting for the last beat. Then, scrape, a sound that didn't belong. Clang, the vibration shuddered through the earth, jolting her back to awareness. Clang, louder now, closer. Coda lifted his head, ears twitching. Marlowe's raw throat managed one croaking cry, answered immediately by Slate's roar. DOC! The world exploded in light as a shovel blade punched through, spraying dirt like confetti. Slate's bloodied face appeared in the gap, his eyes wild. Grab the damn rope. The lifeline slithered toward them, its rough fibers the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Blood slicked the winch handle, making each turn a fresh agony. Slate's breaths came in ragged grunts, his shoulders straining against impossible weight. The rock shifted, an inch, then two. Zane's whimper became a scream as his leg came free, the bone clearly broken. Marlowe lunged forward, bundling the cub against her chest. Coda immediately began licking his brother's wound, his whines high and desperate. Slate collapsed backward into the mud, his ruined hands trembling. One down, he gasped, eyes already scanning the crumbling den. Two to go. The beam wavered over devastation. Clover's blue-tinged gums, Zane's matted fur crusted with vomit, Coda's paws raw and bleeding anew from digging. Worst of all, the granite slab, still pinning Zane's hind leg. Marlowe's stomach lurched. They weren't saved, just granted a stay of execution. Slate's jaw tightened as he assessed the scene, then did something unexpected. He reached into the hole and stroked Coda's head. "Good boy," he murmured, before bracing his boot against the rock. "This is gonna hurt." As the slab tilted, something glinted beneath it. Marlowe's breath caught, a mangled radio collar, its battery compartment shattered. Not just any cub. Coda was part of her study, the one she'd tagged last spring. The mother bear hadn't been some random casualty. She'd been Marlowe's research subject. The realization hit like a physical blow. This tragedy, this suffering, was her fault. Coda met her gaze, his eyes holding no accusation, just grief, and something worse, forgiveness. Each step sent white-hot pain through her battered body, but Marlowe clung to the cub like a rosary. His heartbeat thrummed against her sternum, syncopated with her own. Behind her, Slate carried Clover with surprising gentleness, his usual gruffness replaced by murmured reassurances. Coda brought up the rear, limping but determined. The storm had spent its fury, leaving behind a surreal calm. Dawn painted the gorge in pinks and golds, as if apologizing for the night's violence. Zane nuzzled her chin weakly, his trust a weight heavier than any rock. The big man sagged against the porch rail, his bloodied hands hanging limp. Marlowe expected curses, or demands for payment. Instead, as she bandaged Zane's leg, Slate spoke so softly she almost missed it. "My boy." He loved bears too. The admission hung in the morning air, fragile as a cobweb. Marlowe's hands stilled, understanding dawning. This rescue wasn't just about protocol or ethics. It was about a father honoring his child's memory, in the only way left to him. Coda laid his head on Slate's knee, and for the first time, the hardened tracker wept. The cabin's stone hearth crackled, its warmth barely touching the chill in Marlowe's bones. Coda, Clover, and Zane slept in a tangled pile of fur and bandages, their breathing finally steady. But the presence that filled the room wasn't theirs. It was the specter of Slate's unspoken grief, hovering between them like wood smoke. He sat stiffly in the rocking chair, staring at his bandaged hands. Marlowe knew better than to speak. Some losses, some loves, defied words. The fire popped, sending up a shower of sparks that looked, just for a moment, like a child's laughter. The confession came on the tail of a shuddering breath, so quiet Marlowe almost missed it. 8 years old, chasing a bear cub just like yours. His calloused fingers brushed Coda's head, tracing the faded tattoo from her research tag. Found him holding it, like they were friends. The unspoken just before the mother attacked hung between them. Marlowe's throat tightened. This whole time, his reluctance hadn't been about bears at all. It had been about a small grave under an aspen tree, and the father who'd never stopped digging. The cub's rough tongue rasped against her skin, his eyes holding centuries of woodland wisdom. Marlowe hadn't realized she was crying until that moment. Great heaving sobs that shook her exhausted body. For the mother bear she'd failed, for Slate's lost boy, for all the creatures science couldn't save. Coda pressed his forehead to hers, his breath warm and sweet with honey. No judgment, no solutions, just presence. Across the room, Slate watched them, his own eyes suspiciously bright. The cub moved to him next, offering the same simple comfort. The dam broke. The big man's shoulders shook as he buried his face in Coda's fur, finally releasing 8 years of pent-up anguish. The rescue center's director sounded apologetic, but firm. Funding cuts. Only 2 enclosures left. Marlowe's grip on the phone turned white-knuckled. Behind her, the cubs slept unaware of the impossible choice looming. Coda, with his research history, was guaranteed a spot. That left Clover and Zane, siblings who'd never been separated. Slate stood abruptly, his chair scraping loud in the sudden silence. Bullshit. He grabbed his coat with still bandaged hands. Be back by sundown. The door slammed behind him, leaving Marlowe staring at 3 innocent faces and the terrible arithmetic of compassion. The larger cub turned his nose away from the salmon slurry, nudging it toward Clover instead. His golden eyes met Marlowe's, too knowing for an animal. Coda whined, licking Zane's ears as if to say don't do this. But the decision had been made, not by humans, but by the cubs themselves. That night, Marlowe found Slate on the porch, staring at the star-dusted peaks. They always know, he murmured, voice rough. The weak ones. They step aside. His hands clenched around a faded photograph, a gap-toothed boy hugging a teddy bear. The parallel was too painful to voice. The padded crate sat open like a waiting coffin. Marlowe lined it with Clover's favorite blanket, the one that smelled of milk and pine. Coda watched from the corner, his tail tucked low. Zane hadn't moved from his post by the door, his broken legs stretched awkwardly. When Marlowe reached for Clover, Zane limped forward, licking his sister's face one last time. Then, without prompting, he turned and shoved his head into the carrier beside her. Not 2, 3. The message was clear as mountain air. Take us all, or leave us together. Marlowe's hands shook as she unbuckled the divider, making space. The wildlife rescue van bumped down the forest road, its red lights winking through the trees like fading embers. Marlowe stood frozen in the driveway, her arms aching with emptiness. Coda pressed against her leg, his whine echoing the hollow in her chest. She'd signed the paperwork, kissed 3 fuzzy foreheads, made promises she couldn't guarantee. But watching them go, she understood Slate's warning. They carve you open. These wild things. The taillights vanished around the bend, carrying fragments of her heart she'd never reclaim. The first pale light revealed her on the porch steps, the cub's unused leash coiled in her lap. Slate didn't speak, just sat beside her, his battered thermos offering coffee instead of judgment. The silence stretched, filled only by a distant raven's cry. Then, his rough hand covered hers. Got a call, he rasped. From an old buddy in Colorado. Marlowe turned bloodshot eyes toward him, not daring to hope. Slate's thumb brushed the empty collar. Says they've got space for all 3. The whiskey bottle slipped from her fingers, shattering on the stones below. The morning sun painted Slate's weathered face in gold as he stood, pulling Marlowe to her feet. His hands, still bandaged from the rescue, framed hers with surprising gentleness. Let's go get your kids back. Not the cubs, not the bears, her kids. The distinction cracked something open in Marlowe's chest. Coda barked sharply, his tail wagging for the first time in days. Slate shouldered his pack, the ghost of his son no longer a weight, but a compass. Marlowe grabbed the truck keys, her tears drying in the mountain wind. Some journeys didn't end at goodbye. Marlowe nearly dropped her mail when the envelope slid out, the wildlife rescue logo gleaming in the afternoon light. Inside, a single photograph fluttered to the table. 3 healthy bears, coats glossy with summer fat, tussling in a sun-dappled meadow. But it was the 4th figure that stole her breath. A massive sow watching from the tree line, her ears tipped with familiar scars. Gaia. Impossible. But there. The note was brief. Found her at release site. Seems she's been waiting. Coda knows the photo. His happy chuff saying what words couldn't. Families. In the end, find their way home. Marlowe's fingers trembled as she tilted the picture toward the light. There, half hidden in the aspens, a hulking silhouette with unmistakable notched ears. Gaia. Alive. The mother bear stood vigil, watching her grown cubs play with quiet intensity. Coda whined, pressing his nose to the glass as if willing himself through it. Slate's coffee cup froze midway to his lips. That's impossible. But the evidence shown in afternoon sun, the same scarred shoulder, the same protective stance, some bonds. It seemed, even death couldn't sever. We never tagged her. The director's voice crackled through the phone, equal parts baffled and awed. She just appeared at the release site. Marlowe's knees gave way, Slate catching her elbow. Coda spun in frantic circles, his claws clicking on hardwood. The timeline didn't make sense. No bear could survive those injuries. Trek 50 miles, vanish for months, then reappear. Unless she'd been following them all along. Watching, waiting. The director's next words landed like a thunderclap. She's been seen with a fifth smaller bear. The genetic report fluttered to the table, its damning conclusion in bold print. Maternal match confirmed. Marlowe's vision blurred. All this time, grieving a mother who'd never died. The landslide, the burial, the sacrifice, none of it had happened the way they'd believed. Slate's calloused finger traced the data points. That ain't just survival. His voice dropped to a reverent whisper. That's a miracle. Coda yipped sharply, as if to say, I tried to tell you. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, erasing tracks, covering scars, making all things new. The old Ford screamed down Forest Service roads, its suspension bottoming out on washboards. Marlowe clung to the door, the rescue center coordinates burning a hole in her pocket. Coda stood between them, paws braced on the dashboard, nostrils flaring as if he could already scent her. Slate didn't speak, didn't need to. His white-knuckled grip on the wheel said everything. Somewhere ahead, beyond the bend of reality, a mother bear had cheated fate, and they'd be damned if they'd missed the reunion. The meadow held its breath, aspens quivering in silent anticipation. Then, movement. A shadow resolved into substance, into muscle and fur and undeniable presence. Gaia emerged like a woodland spirit, her massive frame haloed in golden hour light. Marlowe's hand flew to her mouth. Slate's breath caught audibly. But it was Coda's reaction that shattered them. A sound neither cub nor man, but something primal and pure. A keening wail of recognition, of homecoming, of love surviving beyond all odds. The mother bear answered in kind, her rumbling vocalization vibrating through their very bones. As the bear drew closer, the truth unveiled itself in terrible beauty. Her once glossy coat hung patchy, her ribs visible beneath scar tissue. One ear hung torn, the same injury they'd seen in the den. This wasn't resurrection, but survival bought with unimaginable pain. She'd crawled from that landslide, healed alone in the wilderness, tracked her cubs across states. For this moment, Coda broke first, streaking across the meadow with a cub's abandon. Clover and Zane followed, their adult bodies moving with instinct older than time. The collision of fur and joy sent birds erupting from the trees, a living explosion of second chances. Up close, the evidence of Gaia's journey mapped her body like braille. Burn marks from lightning strikes, claw rakes from territorial battles, a jagged line where the landslide had nearly claimed her. Yet her eyes, those held only quiet triumph. Slate exhaled sharply. Christ Almighty! Marlowe understood now. This wasn't just a bear. This was a monument to maternal will, a testament that some loves refuse extinction. Coda nuzzled his mother's ravaged ear with infinite gentleness, as if to say, I know what it cost you. The big cub hesitated inches from his mother's face, his nose quivering, not from uncertainty, but from the weight of all those lost months. Where were you? Gaia answered by pressing her forehead to his, their breaths mingling in the crisp air. Then, as if some silent verdict had been reached, she began meticulously grooming him, licking away imaginary dirt just as she had when he was small. Clover and Zane piled into the ritual, a tangle of forgiveness and fresh starts. Marlowe's tears fell freely now, Slate's arm slipping around her shoulders without thought. The smaller sow turned suddenly, vanishing into the brush. When she returned, a tiny bundle clung to her jaws, a cub barely 2 weeks old, its eyes still milky blue. Gaia froze. The meadow froze. Even the wind seemed to pause as Clover deposited the squirming infant at her mother's feet. A grandchild, living proof that the line continued. Gaia's massive head swung toward Marlowe, those ancient eyes holding a message clearer than any data set. You saved them so they could do this. The circle, unbroken. The truck idled at the meadow's edge, its headlights painting the bears in silver relief. Gaia stood sentinel over her reunited clan, her gaze locking with Marlowe's one final time. Not goodbye, but thank you. Slate's rough hand found hers, his son's teddy bear charm warm between their palms. Coda, wild once more, lifted his muzzle in a howl that echoed through the valley. And as the first true snow began to fall, Marlowe did the hardest thing of all. She turned the key, drove away, let the wilderness reclaim its own. Some loves don't end. They simply change form. And that, as any woman past 60 knows, is the secret to surviving it all.